Hi there and welcome back to Japan, where I'm going to be giving you my final conclusions about Band-Maid's new and very recently released album, at the time of recording, Unseen World. After having gone through the entire album and doing a track by track listen through, review, reaction, everything prior to this. Now, just a few things that I should maybe consider mentioning before we dive into this. First of all is the fact that I have my notes right here, so you'll see me constantly looking over to keep up with my notes. I was very thorough about doing this, very thorough of all the things I wanted to mention. Second of all is obviously I listened to the standard version, as you'll know if you have checked out the track by track playlist of review videos that we've already done. And on top of that, obviously, is the fact that because it's a playlist of reviews I did, if you haven't seen those, you can go back and check those out. There will be a link to that playlist in the description below this video, as well as actually this is obviously this is us doing the final review of Unseen World, but I've actually done reviews of every single previous Band-Maid song and album. Now the channel restarted, as many of you know, earlier last year after some copyright problems with the band who shall not be named. Therefore all of the reviews for most of the songs have disappeared, but I did manage to re-upload all of the luckily saved album reviews. So if you want to see how I reacted to all of the previous albums when I heard them before, there's also a playlist for that, so I'll put that in the description below as well, so you can check out either me reviewing all the Unseen World tracks, or you can check out me reviewing all of the albums. Anyway, there you go. We'll start to dive into things, but actually before we do, a couple of things worth mentioning as well. Remember, as always, I say this to people, anyone who's been on the channel for a while knows this. If you're new to the channel, you might need to be informed. We're really honest on this channel about everything. I'm going to be giving you my honest opinions about the positive and negative. So if you're the sort of person who just wants to hear someone tell you that your favourite band is always perfect, then maybe this isn't the video for you. Then again, actually, I did really like this album, so it's going to be mostly praise. Don't worry too much about that. Also to point out, like I say though, we've done every single Band-Maid song on this channel at one time or another, and I've seen them live, all kinds of things. I've really enjoyed following this journey with you guys, so this brings us completely up to date. Obviously, there are a couple of tracks, I think it's Youth, there's a couple of tracks that were on the special edition that I haven't been able to listen to. As minute I can get hold of those, I will be adding them to this review as well. But for now, let's just look at the standard version of the album as it was released, the 12 tracks that we've reviewed, and give a conclusion based on that. So, yeah, like I say, I like this album a lot. I have subsequently, after doing the track by track, you notice there's a couple of days between the last video of that kind of black hole and me doing this. It's because I've been taking, as I always do with albums before giving a final conclusion, I've been taking my time to really wrap my head around this album, listen to it multiple times, because I like doing the first reaction reviews because it's really enjoyable most of the time, because you really are you're really feeling the impact. But when you're reviewing an album as a product, as not just a bag of songs but an entire collection, a work in itself, it's good to give it several different listens in different sort of environments so as to get a feeling for how the album works, because there's lots of different ways that we listen to music. So usually what I do is I usually listen to it like once really intensely, obviously the first reaction, then maybe a couple of times in the background. I always do one thing where I take it out on headphones and just do something like shopping and completely ignore it, try to ignore it and see what cuts through and what grabs me. So a lot of that's also gone into this as well. So really trying to get a view for all the different ways that this album can be effective. And it certainly is it's an interesting one in many ways. So we're going to talk mostly about really how this feels to me as an album. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the individual songs and see how my thoughts and opinions maybe have developed on listening to the album multiple times now. And it's interesting because the album seems to almost be in little clumps for me, little clumps of, because I wrote notes about what I thought about each of the songs, and there's certain little bits, parts of the album where several songs seem to really fit together. Starting at the beginning, the first 3 tracks that we had, which was obviously Warning, No God, and then Afterlife, Afterlife being the song that we'd heard prior to the album by a little bit because it was released in advance. Those 3 songs all to me have got catchier with time. I love the way that this album starts. That little beginning at the beginning of Warning is brilliant. I love the energy of the beginning of the album. The 3 songs do feel very much like they're cut from a similar cloth. They're very sort of fast, energetic, full of things going on, but they all sound very different as well. They've got quite unique individual choruses. The 3 choruses of the 3 songs have grown on me with time. I would say that all 3 of them, when I first heard them, the choruses didn't really stick with me. I'm not going to say that any of them are catchy, but they've grown on me with time. All 3 of them now I like even more than I certainly did upon first listen. So these 3 songs have definitely grown on me. And I just think it's a really strong start to the album. But all of them, like I say, they have a similar sort of feeling of being that charging, energetic, we're going to throw a lot of sound at you kind of affairs. So that's kind of how it starts. Now, the next 3 songs, again, I got a similar review came up for the next 3 songs, which was Manners, I Still Seek Revenge, and HGK. Now, for me, all 3 of those kind of went in a different direction, in that all 3 of those, with time, have maybe lost a bit of impact. None of those 3 songs really cut through for me. They're all still good songs, but a lot of what I want to say about them will come up in some notes that I have later on in this review. But I would say they're ones that they're good, but they, after a few listens, they weren't cutting through and impacting me as much. I would actually say that probably, and this is probably knowing that it's a single, Manners is the one that I had the most trouble with, because to me that really wore off quickly. That was kind of catchy the first time I heard it, but then after a few listens, I got to admit, I started to find it nowhere near as engaging as it was the first time round. Kind of strange that, because like I say, it has a lot of impact on the first listen. I can kind of see why it's a single, but I don't think it has as much replay value as you would maybe expect from a single. And it might also be because the songs around it are so comparatively busy. I did get some comments, and I will actually point out I will be doing another review after this where it's more, I'm going to be going through, there's been some really interesting comments I've read, and I'm going to be going through responding to some of the comments that have definitely raised some interesting points about my reviews, because like I said, I love the conversational element of this. This is a great musical community. So I will be coming back to a lot of your comments in a separate video after this one. But so I'm more talking about just my opinions here. But I did also want to point out that I had seen some comments where people had picked up on the fact that I described Manners as being a somewhat rudimentary song, and maybe it was the choice of wording maybe sparked a slightly incorrect thought about what I was saying. But I would definitely say that if you compare that to some of the songs around it, I think it would be almost unarguable that it is comparatively more rudimentarily written and easier to play than a lot of the songs around it, in my opinion, at very least. But I was sort of more basing that on the Band-Maid level. So it's still a very intricate song, but it doesn't have as much of the intricacies of the songs around it. Now, like I say, the first 3 songs, they've just grown on me with time. They've grown on me. These songs, not so much. One of the things that I felt a little bit about I Still Seek Revenge and HGK is that although they seem to be fantastic demonstrations of musicianship, for me, they felt less assertive than the first 3 songs. Equally sort of intent on being crazy, but they kind of felt a little bit more messy. So I felt that this album really put its best foot forward. So in looking at Manners, great song, but it just didn't sort of keep the replay value for me. It's one that I certainly think if you have nice breaks between it, if it was one that I just heard it maybe on the radio once a week, then it would have great impact. But certainly if you were listening, if you're binging this album, listening to it a lot like I have been in the last few days, then I think Manners doesn't stick up, like I say, so much to replay value. I Still Seek Revenge and HGK, they have a lot of power when you really focus on them, but if you're listening to the album in the background, they kind of the ones where you tune out a little bit after a while, because that not quite the same degree of assertiveness to those songs. And I'll go into the technical reasons of why a little bit later on in this review. I'm going to sort of talk about that in a bit more detail. Now, after that, obviously, we've got Sayanakidori, which I'm now able to say without stumbling, and Why. These 2 songs, as I pointed out before, I know they kind of go in a slightly more, I almost don't want to say poppy. Some people have been saying some comments that have really indicated that you guys think these songs are quite poppy, especially Sayanakidori, but they are still basically rock songs. You know, there isn't that much difference between pop and rock a lot of the time, except for just the sounds that you choose and the speed that you play it even. But, you know, the actual writing style, often we're still talking about things based around a similar sort of contemporary style of writing. So I do still consider Sayanakidori and Why to be rock songs, but yeah, they have that more poppy, catchy, radio-friendly vibe to them. I think that these 2, for me, whereas, like I said, the first 3 tracks have really grown on me, and then the next 3 tracks slightly gone down from how much I liked them initially. I say that with Sayanakidori and Why, they've kind of stayed very much level, which is what I love about this album. It certainly is appearing in clumps. These have stayed level. I really loved these 2 songs from the get-go, and my feeling towards them has kind of stayed the same. they just are very catchy. They're engaging. Like I say, they are not just a case of a chorus. Why Always still surprises me, actually, because it has a sort of, like I said, a sort of rudimentary, to use that word that people didn't like me using on manners, rudimentary style of writing in the chorus. But that's kind of stuck with me just because I think it's got such an infectiously sort of fun, cheeky sort of, it really is in line with what I think I expect from the girls. It very much is a feeling that, just to me, it just kind of works a lot tonally. I like the delivery. I like the layers in the chorus. The fact that you've got that sort of cool and answer thing. It really feels like a song which would just be epic live. And I mean that partly, not so much even for the complexity of musicianship, but just the interplay between the band and the audience over a song like this. I think that's a really great one for that. And Sayonaki Dori is just like catchy as hell. It's just got a good sort of catchy radio friendly vibe to it. And with Miku singing as well, as it has since been confirmed that is Miku, I was right. Die Hard fans just going... Yeah, Sayonaki Dori, just those two songs. I loved them when I first heard them. I still love them. It's probably because they haven't got much further to go in my estimations. They just kind of appeal to me. And now, Chemical Reaction. This is, because the last 4 songs, I'm going to go into them in a little bit more individual detail. Chemical Reaction is a song that... Incidentally, I had read a comment on our Discord from someone whose opinions I often respect very much, who said that he kind of felt the entire second half of the album from Sayonaki Dori onwards, he just didn't like the writing. So I was intrigued to review this, kind of thinking of that in mind as well. Chemical Reaction to me was one that I said initially that I wasn't really taken by it. I did sort of say that I haven't actually confirmed this, but I think this is the one that the band had said had a bit of a Nickelback feel. I have to assume it is because it's the only song which really feels like that to me. Some people had, there was one comment I read, again, I'll go into the comments a bit more detail in the future video, but one comment said that they really did think that I'd been biased by that. I really don't. I mean, like I say, I don't necessarily think that Nickelback is a negative comparison. I don't really like most of Nickelback, but their core sound in their most popular albums was basically a very impactful, strong sound. It's just the songwriting didn't really live up to it. And like I said, this really, for me, only from Nickelback took that sound, that sort of hard-hitting sound. A lot of people had compared it to that sort of high-energy sort of 80s metal as well. I think some people said 70s, but I think it was mainly sort of that 80s hair metal vibe. And I got that a lot. I guess really maybe it's just best to say that whole style is one that I can appreciate, but I'm not so much into. It just felt to me like one of the biggest problems I noticed as it went on. I had pointed out that I found the song didn't have, and it had some interesting little twists and turns in it, but it didn't have really enough to keep me engaged. I think one of the problems is that the chorus, again, they were referencing that sort of 80s style, sort of shout the title line style of chorus, but I felt that it needed something more to be engaging. So yeah, Chemical Reaction, I wasn't a big fan of it to begin with, but I must admit, after repeat listens, the energy stayed high. So again, my opinion on this hasn't really changed too much. I just kind of maybe with time have kind of become a little bit more settled with what it is. But yeah, I would say that it's getting close to one that I would probably skip. But at least for the listens I've had so far, I haven't felt the need to skip it yet. But I can see it's just not so much my taste. I don't feel like it really gets the most out of their sound. It's nice to hear them doing something a bit different. I don't think it gets the most out of what makes them great. You can really hear them adding intricacies and trying to make it more interesting. But yeah, for me, that's just kind of a shrug and accept it type of song. Giovanni was one that a lot of people have made comments about. The melody of this song was kind of, it wasn't really a melody sort of song. There wasn't much attention to melody in this, which is quite interesting because the song afterwards, which I believe translates as Ambition, I'm not going to try the Japanese title again because I know I got it wrong the first time. I should have written that down in my notes. That's funny, the song after it is very heavily melody based, which to me is nice because the two songs kind of complement each other. In fact, there seems to be a lot of that approach to the songwriting, and this is why the album order I think is so important, and I'm just so surprised about the special edition where they completely changed the song order, but fair enough. So Chemical Reaction being kind of a bit of a plodding song, heavy, yeah, impactful, but plodding. Then Giovanni, which is all about that sort of passionate, full-on blast of power, and then followed by Ambition, which is, then adds a melodic element that the two prior songs had maybe lacked. There's a lot where this part of the album, for me, none of the last 4 songs, actually, to be fair, hugely stand out as being in their own right songs, which I would go, yeah, I really want to listen to that one again. But there's something nice about the way the end of the album's crafted. The album kind of, the songs each are positioned in a way that they add something to the one prior. And that goes into Black Hole as well. I mean, Black Hole really does take the sort of melodic nature of Ambition before it, and then says, all right, we've done that, now let's just do something crazy to blast our way out. And it's a great ending in tone. I must admit that I loved it the first time as an ending because it really had that impact. After repeat lessons, I think maybe I now wish that the ending was more theatrically big almost, had sort of, it's just sort of really, really hard playing. Which is great, but once you kind of already in your head know that that's the way the album's going to end, you kind of felt like it could have gone out in a bigger bang in other ways. But again, this is something that we're going to get around to. There's a few points I want to make on this. So overall, for me, the highlights of this album were definitely the first 3 tracks really, really get me. I love those. Warning, just the way Warning comes in, that's just such a brilliant album intro. No God's grown on me a lot of time. I'm kind of starting to hope that becomes a single. It's a very sort of Japanese style of chorus writing, so I imagine that Pony Canyon might lean towards that more than maybe a lot of the Western fan base. It's that sort of key change chorus, if I remember correctly. Yes. So I think that it's a really good sort of call for at least a Japan single. And then Sayonara Dori and YYY, those two have really stuck with me as well, just from being sort of catchy and having a real sort of fun element. So I think, the first 3 songs give you that real blasting energy, and then Sayonara Dori and YYY gives you kind of a bit more fun. And then other points in the album, you have more of that intensity. Songs like Giovanni and Black Hole are definitely playing for a more intense vibe. So if you're looking for something which is more mood-based, then that's there as well. So the album's got variation. Like I say, my highlights were definitely the first 3 tracks, Sayonara Dori and YYY. Those aspects, those were the parts I really liked. As for the members, it's worth pointing out, I mean, as I said before, in our first year end of year awards, we gave Best Musician to all of Band-Maid for their sort of collaborative work together, just how high quality the overall performance is. And I know they're a band where a lot of their fans are really, really into the performance aspect, the fact that they're such good musicians. They love the fact that adds such a wonderful aspect to the band, which is absolutely valid. I've always been a great believer that songwriting comes before musicianship, but if you have already got good songwriting, then good musicians can get the most out of it. So, order of priority. But I too, although, like I say, songwriting is my main thing that I think is more important, I too am very much, I appreciate just how much musicianship goes into this band. And on that front, it's worth pointing out that for me, the last album, Conqueror, certainly was a real highlight of Konami being able to do more interesting things, go in more interesting directions. Here, I think her playing has just been as good as ever. What I did like that the solos all have very different feels here. There's not a feeling that she's just sort of playing her signature sound. She really does adjust her solos to match each song, which is interesting. I did get a feeling that each solo was very identifiable on this album, that was great amongst anything. But here, because it was more of a rock album than Conqueror had been, most of the time she was playing in a rock style. So for me, it felt like she more showed her identity in the solos here, where I think of Conqueror, it was more the way that she was layering interesting things and she was doing more different sounds. So Konami, great work as ever. I think looking at the bass work we get from Misa here, though, she's much more front and center than she'd been on the previous album, and I think that is a big, big aspect of this whole CD, is the fact that you could see, and there'd been a lot of response from people previously about how on the previous album, because of the whole sound of it, she was mixed quite low, and the compression did kind of mean that it wasn't so clear to hear what she was playing. On this album, you can hear a lot of the mid-range and higher tones of the bass have been really turned up. So the bass, as well as being underneath everything, is part of the melodic makeup of the songs. You really hear what the bass is playing. It's not just subliminal. And that really stands forward. We've got like bass solos in this. We've got all kinds of stuff going on where the bass comes to the forefront. And I think that is really good. We're hearing how good she is, and we're also hearing just the level of musicianship is just off the charts, and it's like I say, it's really great to have an album where bass is so much a focus. I got almost like a Flea vibe in some of the songs, where it was kind of like anyone who's sort of familiar with Flea's work. I'm not a big fan of Red Hot Chili Peppers in actuality, but I am a big fan of Flea's stuff, just because the way that he manages to throw stuff into songs, and you think, how on earth did you make that work? How on earth is that mess of notes working so well in this song? And that's definitely the feeling I got here, is there's just some parts where just these incredibly bizarre like bass lines come in, and you just think, that's clever. How did you get that to fit in there? So there's some great stuff on that. A lot of people have been talking very heavily about the drum work on here. I have again, I would say a similar thing about the drum work as I would to about the guitar work here, in that I feel that whereas previously on Conqueror we had a focus on a very different range of tempos and a very different range of styles of mood, this is kind of more of a rock album from start to finish, and therefore I agree there's some real sort of good shows of skill on here, but I don't think there's quite as much need to be as adaptable in playing style. And I do actually believe that one of the comments that came out around the time of the last album was that Kanye was actually talking about the complication of playing in these different styles that she wasn't used to, and I would be surprised if she was to say something similar about this album. I think this is more going back into the comfort zone for her, but yes, it's not to say that it's a lazy or complacent performance. Certainly the hashtag no bias, but the skill level is completely off the charts, and there's some fantastic bits in this where really, you're just hearing stuff and thinking that is a demonstrator. That supports why I say a lot of the time that she is amongst the best drummers currently performing, without a shadow of doubt, in my opinion. Moving on to, obviously, we have to talk about the vocals. Again, the vocals, they're performed in a style that we've heard from them before, but I just feel like this is them polishing an already fantastic vocal, fantastic singer that they have. It's really Psyche's put forward just a range of really nice performances here. I did point out that on my Conqueror review that one of the things I really noticed that she developed on that album was her ability to really sort of nail the entrance and the exit of the notes, the rhythm as well, the precision of how each syllable was delivered was really very clearly on point on the last album. I think that comes through here again. There's a lot of those bits where there's changes in rhythm where it's really nicely pulled off. There's a feeling that there's almost a sort of a clockwork-like quality to how well the vocals are delivered here. And that obviously brings us on to our wonderful lead member. A lot of people have been talking about what Mika did on this album. And I think, again, I would have to say something, and I hate to be repetitive, I'd have to say something similar to what I said about most of them on this, which is that it's not that she was doing anything that she hadn't done before. It more felt like a perfection of what she was already doing. The backing vocals, just that little bit more crisp, that little bit more well-timed. There was more backing vocals, I got the feeling, on this than there had been on previous albums, and it was nicely balanced, especially again in those first three songs. I loved the way the backing vocals came in, countered a lot of call and answer style parts there. So the backing vocals were more prominent, which obviously shows a certain confidence that they have in her ability to deliver those backing vocals, a confidence that she has, and a confidence that is obviously paid off by the fact that it does sound really great. You're starting to really, kind of like you get with Scandal, where there's that wonderful balance between the two very different vocal styles, where they got multiple vocalists, but certainly between Tommy and Haruna, they've got that very different vocal style. It's a sort of a similar dynamic going on here, and with the more songs with a presence of two vocals in them, it really did help to add something of a personality. And the guitar work at the centre of it, again, very good, playing as a rhythm guitarist. The rhythm guitar was solid throughout. There was some really sort of front and centre stuff. I imagine that with her being getting more and more confident on guitar, she's been playing for quite a few years now. I don't think there's any confidence issues. It's not like she's a newbie just by comparison to the people she's performing with, but certainly there is such a focus on guitar in this album that I think that might be partly with a sort of confidence that she's getting better and better at what she does. And not knowing who individually played which individual bit, there certainly were parts where there was complicated stuff happening on both guitars. So I get the feeling that we're up at that level where she's really sort of confident to do more than just the basics. And that to me works out brilliantly. But this obviously, this brings me back to that point that I was saying, that there's a lot of thinking about this album in comparison to the previous albums. So I kind of wrote down some notes about the 4 albums that they've really done since becoming writers. Obviously, we can talk about all the albums, but just to keep it clear, just thinking about what developments have been made between just Bring Out World Domination, Conqueror, and now Unseen World. The thing that came across to me is that if I just sort of talk through about my feelings about these 4 albums, just to give an idea of where I stand, because obviously we all have a lot of thoughts and hopes going into a new album of where we think it's going to go, what it's going to be like, what we want it to be like, various things about that. So now kind of marking their own progression, I would say that when we were looking at Just Bring It, that was a really good album. A lot of people really loved that album. I know when I first started reviewing these guys was just after World Domination came out, and I think at that time most people we spoke to, Just Bring It was still their favourite album. I think that album was in places. This is a band who doesn't necessarily aim at catchiness is not the crux of their songwriting style, but they do have catchy songs. Sort of, I always say not sort of pop chart catchy, but catchy enough to certainly stay in your head for a little while. Just Bring It was definitely one of those catchy albums. It had some variation on it. It had some of them being brilliant musicians as well. It was just sort of a good all-round album. Now, when we moved on to the next album, World Domination, the catchiness stayed there. That album has some of my favourite singles by the band. I really like. I heard that there were a lot of songs that were videos weren't actually singles as well, but it has some of my favourite songs on there. Really like that. But for me, that suffered in not having much in the way of variation. It was an album that seemed to be pretty unidimensional. I know people point out that there's like a ballad and a acoustic bit, but as a general, it seemed to be pretty much on one tone all the time for me. But again, the musicianship was getting better, and I think that's one thing I point out through all of these albums. The musicianship seems to get better and better each time, which is great. You can hear them getting more of that. Now, for me, where Conqueror came in is Conqueror, again, another really catchy album, but it had much more variation. It almost felt to me like they had almost, as artists, had a similar response to their previous album that I had, which I found kind of nice. I liked that they went in that different direction. They added some production, which I know wasn't for everyone. I liked the production. I felt that the production didn't shine because of the mastering and the compression and the final jobs they did that compressed it all down. I think if there'd been more of a uncompressed lively mix of that released, it would have really shown that the production was a good element. And like I said, did things like squashing down the bass to the point that the bass wasn't audible enough. It felt like it was crushed at least, and it wasn't sort of cutting through. That being said, that it felt like it had a variation of moods, and that was one of the big things, is that there felt to be a lot of emotional content. I did say for me that album was the turning point where I realised how much emotional content they could throw in their songs, because before you just sort of enjoyed them as a band who just did rock, and it was really good rock and it had a really good energy, but the energy became also a mixture with some very emotionally interesting songs as well. And that album, like I say, I enjoyed it straight from the get-go, but it grew on me with time as well. It's just an album that I thoroughly enjoy. Certainly that is my favourite album up until this point. So many things about that to me just showed that they'd improved in so many ways. But that was such a good album, in my opinion, the last one. It had its faults, don't get me wrong, it had its faults, like I say. Most of them coming down to that final mastering process. It was such a good and varied album that it was always interesting to see where they were going to go. Now, as I said, my view was that they were going to do, and I thought this was backed up when we saw the announcement of the special edition. It had like 2 CDs, one was like Roots and one was Progress, sorry if I'm remembering the words wrong, but one basically was saying like, this is us doing us and this is us doing something different. I therefore expected that they were going to go completely bizarre. I thought that the Band-Maid thing had been an indication that they were going to do something really weird, like that we were going to get some stuff that was totally out of genre, there's some stuff that was not even rock at all. There were going to be some jazzy things, just on the basis that the quality of musicianship is so amazingly high that I was like, they could pretty much play whatever they want. So is this them going to do that? It turns out that this album was rock throughout. In fact, I've read some comments where some people have been surprised that there's not even like one ballad on here. It's just rock from start to finish. There is a couple of medium tempo songs. There are some songs that are a little bit more radio friendly, but it is pretty much just rock all the way through. So, how does that weigh up? Well, one of the interesting things is that I do feel that it works more because the album is more concise. It's shorter and more punchy than World Domination, which certainly works for it. It does, like I say, have, even though it's rock, it has more different sort of types of rock. The tempo does feel like it changes. There's a sort of urgency to this. It seems to be the fastest sort of tempo album, I would say, of theirs, or at least a lot of double time stuff in there. If not tempo, there's a lot of double time playing on the drums. It feels like the most urgent and fastest of their albums that they've ever released. But it does, like I say, it does know how to sort of pull back. It has its moments of mid-tempo stuff as well. So in a way, this manages to be more concise and more varied, at least, than World Domination. I don't think it's as catchy as any of their previous albums. That's one of the interesting things. I don't think, despite songs like YYY, which is an odd kind of catchy, it's not your normal sort of sing-along melody. And like I said, the first three songs, they're kind of catchy in their own way. Sayonaki Dori is definitely a standout example of doing a catchy chorus. But overall, the album doesn't have as many catchy songs that stick in your head as I felt that any of the previous three albums did. What it does have is it has a focus really on musicianship. And that kind of goes in a couple of different ways. Now, first of all, to really talk about the things that I found most positive about this album, like I say, more different ways of like that rock feeling coming through, more different ways that you could hear them using their skills. I think their skills more on display in this album than any album previously, and that sometimes is just something you can relish. You just hear something and you just go, wow, my ears don't get treated to this level of musicianship very honestly. So it really has a sort of awe value to this album. It really hits you and you can't help but be like, wow. But obviously once you're used to that, that's something that, that wow factor, certainly on the first listen. On repeat listens though, it grew on me in its musicianship. Like I say, I found, first time around I didn't really find virtually any of it very catchy, but upon repeat listens, songs that had previously not been as catchy to me, like the first three songs, became more catchy with time. So, like I say, not the catchiest album, but enough to, sort of maintain that slightly, everyone likes a good chorus aspect to the album. Certainly after the wow factor of the musicianship had started to become more expected. Like I say, if you repeat listens, you know what you're listening to. You now know how high the bar is set. So, in a lot of ways, repeat listens allowed me to really settle down and find this album is actually quite balanced in its mixture of focus on musicianship and writing. Whereas, I fully accept that as brilliant as the musicianship was on Conqueror, it was more about songwriting than it was about musicianship, and that's kind of showed by the way that it was produced and mixed, and that, a lot of the instruments weren't as clear necessarily in that. So I really like how the album grew on me, and I think very much it's worth saying that for die-hard fans, like I say, a lot of the people who love this band love them because there's such a quality to the musicianship. I think this is one which really is kind of like a love letter to the die-hard fans who have supported them and, if you like, held them up on a rightly earned pedestal for the quality of their playing. Sort of always said, this is a band who they're cheeky and they're fun, but we can love them because it's not disposable. It's actually something of real intense quality. So, like I say, those sorts of fans, I can 100% see this is a real love letter to them. For me, the things that perhaps didn't work as much about this one, like I say, I was disappointed not to see more variation of styles. They were obviously going for a variation of different types of rock, and there was a fantastic comment, I think it was CMC said on our Discord, that there was variation, but it was a variation in a different type of palette from the one we expected. We expected a variation of genres, perhaps, or maybe that's what I was expecting. Instead of a variation of genres, what we actually got was a variation of focuses on rock. A lot like how Babe Metal, for example, they always pretty much do metal, but they try to do every different version of metal. That's what this felt like. This felt like, okay, what are the different types of rock? What's that kind of Nickelback style 80s power rock? Let's do some punk. Let's do some, sort of trippy, tripleted swing beat, sort of dancey styles of rock. There was that kind of focus. So I think that's more a subjective thing. I think if you're a rock fan, this album would be very interesting, and I'm sure anyone who's watching this has already heard the album already before. So I think if you're someone who really feels that this is a very varied album, that's probably because rock is maybe your main focus. For me, like I say, I guess I just wanted to hear them really go out and out crazy and do different genres, but I think that's a subjective opinion. Certainly a lot of people agree with me that last little ending of Manners really made me think, yeah, I want you to do something like that as a song, just to kind of show that you can, and I said this as one of my reviews, to challenge your fans. I felt that that's something that maybe I wanted more than other fans wanted. Maybe that's just more my subjective opinion. I kind of felt I wanted to be more challenged by them doing something totally unexpected. But what they instead did was found a way of taking what they were already good at and finding facets in it, finding variations in that rock style that they hadn't explored. So there is a lot of new things in here, but it just wasn't the things that I was personally looking for. But still, like I say, I can really see that that's more me being perhaps different from a lot of other people in the core fan base than necessarily them doing something that in any way is not a step forward. Because it's, like I say, certainly the album is a step forward in many ways, writing included, from the rock aspect. The only other thing, this is something I wanted to mention. I did talk about this a little bit, and apologies if it sounds like I am aware that most of what I'm talking about sounds very critical, but that's because if I just come in here and say, look, it's a brilliant album played by brilliant musicians who set themselves a very high bar, then I know this is very boring and it doesn't give us much to talk about. Overall, I do really love this album. Don't get me wrong, it's an album that I've enjoyed listening to multiple times, some songs more than others, but overall I've really enjoyed it. But just to sort of cover one more thing I wanted to do, which I felt a little bit was issue. It was that whole thing around track 5, track 6, I Still Seek Revenge, and HGK especially, but it came out in other points in the album, but especially there, was a feeling that with them trying to alter their writing style, their style of rock writing, but whilst also doing very high-paced songs, there were points that, and I think those two songs were the ones that I would single out, where it felt like it actually became a bit messy. And this is something I've never really found with Band-Maid before. So when Conqueror was at its most compressed, for a lot of people it sounded very messy because all the sounds were being squashed. But I could kind of hear in the arrangement that everything was nicely balanced, and this is why I was so frustrated not to hear an uncompressed copy. When it comes to something like I Still Seek Revenge and HGK, there's a feeling that sometimes that in their interest, everyone trying to sort of add their own musical take on what's going on, that there are parts where the album not the album, but kind of around that point, those two songs where they start to feel a little bit messy, like the instruments are not giving each other enough room. So that was something that I think kind of detracted from those two songs. I think those two songs, they probably could have backed off a little bit on the sort of the barrage of sound, and that was kind of proved just by how well Warning, No God and Afterlife did the exact same thing at the beginning of the album, but with, to me, a sense that they were more precise. It might just be that by that time in the album, my ears had just maybe had enough, but I don't think it was that, because every time I listened to those first three songs again, they felt to me much more decisive, much more on point than I Still Seek Revenge and HGK did. So that's also an element. I think there were signs that they were finding their way on this album. There were signs that they were looking to do something new, and they were therefore clearly pushing themselves, which is very laudable. I think in certain parts of the album it worked better than others. That's probably how I bring that together and describe that. Now, let's have a little look. There are a few things that I wanted to sort of round this one off with. So, yeah, like I say, one of the big parts of the conclusion, and like I say, a lot of people might be focusing on the fact that I've been critiquing a lot here. Overall, this is a positive review, and that is what I'm coming round to, but I have to throw in the critiques to try and, talk about the things that are interesting to talk about. For me, this is an album that I think, well, for the band, I think this album is a good thing. It shows that they are still working on moving forward, still working on finding the most interesting way to get the most out of their sound. I think that the album definitely demonstrates that there's no sense of complacency. I think it demonstrates that they're willing to push themselves. I think that it demonstrates they're very much in touch with their fans. As I say about any band, as a band moves on with time, they change. Especially if, the only bands who don't change are frankly the bands who are not showing the correct love for creative progress. And it's the mere fact that Band-Maid are progressing and doing different things, to me, demonstrates that they are showing a love for the creative process. And that means that this is totally laudable for me. So long as they keep on doing that on their albums, I will be 100% happy. Now, I said before this came out, because I kind of had a feeling when they joined Pony Canyon, that there might be a couple of really poppy songs on here, or that it might go the other way and Pony Canyon might know what they've invested in and therefore kind of insist the Band-Maid do their core sound. But it could go one or two ways. And I was kind of saying to everyone, myself included, in those videos where I talked about that if the album comes out and it is not what you expect, so long as there's clearly love and effort go into it, then, we have to accept that bands move forwards in ways that we can't always predict. So for me, I would say that this was not really necessarily the album that I was hoping it was going to be, but that's from my own subjective opinion. From my opinion as someone who loves music, this is an album that I really enjoy and I can respect. It has some songs that I will certainly take away from it and really enjoy. I don't think that overall for me the album is as enjoyable as Conqueror, but that's because of my personal taste. I think the album as a demonstration of musicianship and evolution is exactly what it should be. It's exactly what it should be. It's a step forward in many ways. A step back maybe in ways that are only subjective to opinion. For myself, I would say that maybe this demonstrates the band are taking a direction that I like, but is not quite as exciting as what I hoped it was going to be, again, for my personal opinion. Like I say, when I saw them live, one of the things I really liked about seeing them live when they were kind of basically there, they were touring Conqueror, is that the show felt very varied. It was the addition of those songs from Conqueror, like Page, that were on a very different tone, made the show really interesting because they've got enough rock songs to play 4-hour, 5-hour set if they want to. So I felt that they didn't need more rock songs, and this album is entirely rock. So yeah, that's probably why I felt that way, because I wanted to hear more of them using their skills for other things. But this is, in my opinion, both, like I say, an advancement in many ways and a love letter to, I think, the fans who perhaps have been the ones who've supported them the most, the ones who've seen them live, who seem to be the ones who are most invested for the best part in those rocky songs. It seems that they've really played to their base, to use the expression that seems to have been popularised by perhaps not the best person of recent years. So it felt to me like, yeah, if I was to give a conclusion of this from an objective standpoint, this album is a really great thing. It's moving them in a great direction. It's pleasing their fans and increasing, seemingly, their listens online, increasing their exposure. It's a great thing. If I was to review it from my own opinion, just as a subjective, personal opinion, it's got some songs that I really enjoy. I'd be inclined to listen to quite a few songs from this regularly again. Listening to the whole album again, I feel that the album's really nicely, the song structure is what makes this so listenable to me. Like I say, it manages to do what World Domination never managed to do, which was, because World Domination, like I said, I think it has some songs on there which, from a subjective opinion, I perhaps like more. But it doesn't feel as much of an album as this does. So I think I could listen to this again just because of how well structured it is as an album, how much knowing that it is rock, how much it manages to do interesting things with that formula, how much they've stepped away from what on previous albums I described as the Band-Maid writing formula. Certainly up to Conqueror, there was this feeling that pretty much every song, they were all different in very interesting ways, but overall the structure was usually the same. But Conqueror changed that a bit, and this really has shown again that they're really willing to change up the structure of their songs. There's some really great things on this that I think would make this a listenable again album. But I don't know, it just doesn't to me feel like it has the appeal of songs that will really burn into my memory as much as songs from previous albums. So this is a mixed bag, and I think it's going to take quite a long time for me to really come to a final conclusion of what I really do think of Unseen World. From a personal opinion. Like I say, it's very clear to answer from a objective opinion. From a subjective and personal opinion, like I say, there's songs that are growing on me every time I listen to it. There's a feeling that no individual song necessarily stands out, but overall the album is very well structured. It's a mixed bag of things that I think really do require you to sort of be in the right mood for it. It's an album that I think if you're in the mood for, it's probably the best album out there. If you're not in the mood for, maybe not at all. Like I say, it's very hard for me to sort of structure a final opinion on this, which was interesting because on the previous album, it had been so easy on the previous albums to say what I thought. On this one, much harder. So, my final conclusion, yeah, I definitely recommend it. I think it's brilliantly played. I think it's got some real development in terms of writing. I think it's got some moments of sheer joy. It's got some real developments in variation of their rock sound. I think it showcases some of the best musicianship in the world at the current moment. And yet, subjectively, to my opinion, I find it one that maybe just being in a different mood would completely change my opinion on whether I find it engaging or not. Certainly, though, I think that for the fans, this is a great album. This is a great album that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy. Now, on my notes, I just sort of left a little bit at the end where I just sort of left a thing to say, okay, at this point, wrap it up. And it is at this point, like I say, that I just kind of realised I find it very hard to know what the final conclusion really is. So as always, I'm going to say on this one that you guys can give your comments, like I always let you do. I really want to know what you guys thought about this album. And you can comment on here, but if you've already commented, that's fine, because like I said, we'll be going through those anyway to do another review, maybe in a few days, or maybe next weekend, I don't know, where I'm going to respond to your comments and see how they affect my opinion. Because like I say, my subjective opinion on this album is one I'm having a lot of trouble really forming, and does seem to change very much from moment to moment. I know which songs really appeal to me. I know which songs are my highlights. I know what I like about this, but just finding that sort of ideal moment where it's like, yeah, this is the moment that this album is perfect for. Maybe that's part of what's going to help. Anyway, enough waffle. I've gone through all my notes, like I say. I still can't form a conclusion, but I definitely know that the one thing that is objectively true is that this album is a step forward in many ways, even if they're not the ways that I had expected or perhaps was hoping for. It is a step forward. So like I say, get in there, give me your comments, justify them. I'll do that review where I come back to talk about your comments and go through them and try and answer any questions or allow you to challenge my opinions so I can see if you help me develop a different view on things. Always liking and subscribing, those things are greatly appreciated. Remember, all the social medias linked in the description below, including the Patreon. You guys, keep on saying that, keeps on being true. You keep this channel running. Please remember that we're looking to do more album reviews in the future, as well as doing the track-by-track song reviews. So there's a lot of albums that I want to dive in where people are maybe not so interested in the individual tracks, maybe they're older albums by other bands. So I'm looking to review a lot of albums as well. I'm going to start adding that to what we're doing. But yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you to you for making it through to the end of this hugely waffly video. And until I hopefully see you very soon in Japan for the next one of these, for now, ciao ciao.